Welcome to the Yahowah blog. We're just a couple of days from celebrating the 6th of 7 Moed Miqraey of Yahowah. Having now made our way through the glorious occasion of Teruah, we are approaching Yom Kipurym. And if you notice, I spoke of it in the plural, not as Yom Kippur. And the reason I did so is because I like to be consistent with Yahweh's terminology. That is also why I didn't speak of the previous chag or celebration as Rosh Hashanah, because God only says negative things about Babylon, and Rosh Hashanah is the Babylonian New Year. I guess it's to celebrate the Babylonian Talmud. But God is quite insistent that Teruah is going to be the greatest show on earth, and that during Teruah, not only will there be a magnificent gleaning of God's people, of olives, 2 or 3, meaning 2 or 3,000 from the uppermost branches representing Yehudim, and 4 or 5 from the branches which have been cut away representing Yisrael. But that's just the beginning of things, because on that evening, during that evening, there will be the 4 chariots, the ones that are mistaken in Revelation as being the chariots of the apocalypse. There are no such thing. The red chariot actually holds the Atonement, this bloody red bull who is a man of the earth, who will be sacrificed on this day by none other than the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan, which we now know to be Donald Trump. And on this day, there will be 3 other chariots, a black, a white, and a mottled colored chariot of various colors, because the black chariot will be taking those dressed in black, all of those who are overtly religious, to Sheol, while it picks up in the white chariot every Yehud and Yisraelite the world over who is not overtly religious and political, who has been misled as opposed to engaged in misleading others. And they will be brought into Jerusalem to benefit from the sacrifice of the Anima Parah. At the same time, there will be a dappled chariot that will do the same thing for Goyim. The Goyim who are not Christians, who are not Muslims, who are not Marxists, who are not MAGA, who are neither political nor religious, who are not conspiratorial and certainly not anti-Semites, who have the right attitude and aptitude to be of value going forth during this millennial celebration of Sukkah, will be brought in that dappled chariot, also to benefit from the sacrifice of the red heifer. That sacrifice is explained in Numbers 19. You'll read all about it if you study why Eliah will be the master of ceremonies, because he performed similarly, ousting all the stigma of religion and politics from Israel 2,888 years prior to this moment. And you will also experience at this time what is presented prophetically in Numbers 5. And that is to cleanse and to purge this remnant of Yisrael, such that they are prepared to meet Yahweh and the Messiah Dowd and enter the millennia celebration of Eden on earth during Sukkah. So this is a marvelous time, because it will present many, many thousands of Yehudim and Yisraelites along with Goyim, so that they can be prepared for this day on Yom Kippur. Now, on Yom Kipurym, one of the things that is quite interesting is that we will have already witnessed on Teruah the transformation of the earth to the Garden of Eden. All traces of the religious and of religion, all traces of the politicians and politics, all traces of militants and their weapons of war will all be extinguished. They will all be incinerated so that there is no trace of them. And then the entire earth will be transformed into the conditions experienced in the Garden of Eden. And with that, there will be the expectation of life as it once was, 6,000 years ago. We made a post this morning speaking of that reality, and I'm sure we are going to get a lot of pushback from people that are very uncomfortable with what it implies. But in a world that is so poisoned by religion, where women are demeaned and where women must be clothed from chin to toe, can't show any ankle, and most certainly, if you're a Muslim, can't even show anything but your eyes. Even them, they should be hidden. And in Judaism, the woman must be shaved bald after her wedding and again wrap herself all up. These are religious traditions that are exceedingly unpopular with God. God wants women and men to enjoy one another, to see one another as beautiful, to fall in love and enjoy one another's company, to see the beauty that is to behold in one another. So, since we know by God's own testimony that he is reestablishing Eden on earth, and on Sukkah, he is taking us back into it, what do we know about the attire in Eden? It was nakedness, wasn't it? They didn't wear anything, and they were not the least bit ashamed or concerned about it. God said it was good. They thought it was good. You should hear Adam's speech the moment that he saw Yahowah. It was basically Yowza. Now this is a sight for happy eyes. There is no shame in our nakedness. There is no shame in loving sensuality. God never speaks against it. It is men and their religious influence that have done so. And unfortunately, we live in cultures that have been conditioned by the religious for 6,000 years. And so their legacy, their stigma, their stain, their stench is hard to wipe away. But it wasn't until Adam and Chawah rebelled against Yahweh that they felt there was something wrong with their nakedness. And thereafter, nakedness is only used to speak of those who are being exposed for being religious. So there's a story in all of that. And what we wanted to do is to help you understand, to be more comfortable with Yahweh, his creation, and our relationship with him. There should be no concern with modesty. There should be no concern with sexuality. There should be no concern with sensuality and beauty. And that is, in fact, what Yahweh has conveyed. Whether you like it or not, it's important that you get comfortable with it, because we're going to be spending 1,000 years in those conditions in the garden. And it would be really an unpleasant situation to be in it and not be comfortable with who you are or how things are going to be. So I'm here to help prepare you for that upcoming reality. There's also a very stark reality on this day, on Yom Kipurym, which will be celebrated on this coming Wednesday. It'll be the 1st of October as the sun sets wherever you may be, concluding the sunset the following day. It is not a day to abase oneself. It is not a day to try to deprive yourself. It is a day of Kippur, of reconciliations, of celebrating peaceful, harmonious relationship with God after being estranged from God for 3,470 years. It is on Yom Kipurym that a remnant of Israel will be reunited with God. It is an ultimate celebration of life. Yahweh is returning on this day with his beloved son, our Messiah and King, Dowd. And at this time, Dowd's going to be as brilliant as the sun. He is going to be Elyon, the very influence of God in our presence. He will be king of not only the earth, but of the universe. So this is really a glorious occasion, the great homecoming, the family reunion, if you will. And you need to be prepared for the fact that it is Dowd who is returning, and he is returning with Yahweh. That means there is no Jesus. That was, of course, stupid anyway for people to believe in a Jesus. God is not a man. And men most certainly can't kill God. What an unbelievably stupid religion. And then to parade around under the sign of a dead God on a stick, it's reprehensible. And to believe Paul, who Yahowah 666 years before he wrote his first letter to the Galatians, to introduce the concept of this counterfeit known as Jesus Christ, said that Paul was the plague of death. And then in Paul's last letter to the Corinthians, he admitted that he was demon possessed. And every time he quoted God, he misquoted him badly. In fact, every quote that Paul has in his letters conveys the opposite of what God actually said. So why are there 2.2 billion people that believe such nonsense? Why does the religion even exist? Why does Judaism exist as much as they have done to pervert God's testimony? I mean, you began your high holy days with Rosh Hashanah and still mired in Babylon. And you've got no concept of what Yom Kipurym actually represents, nor do you know when it's going to transpire and be fulfilled. This will be an exceedingly celebratory day because the time of Jacob's troubles is fastly approaching. It is going to begin on the 22nd of May, 2026, which is a shabuw'ah, and it's going to continue for 7 years thereafter until Teruah, the 24th of September, 2033. And so the end of the time of Jacob's troubles is also going to be observed on that great day, meaning there'll be 10 days to prepare. Now that there's no longer any war, now that there's no longer any religion or politics or conspiracy or militarism anywhere in the world, and now that God's people are purged and perfected, guiltless, so that they can receive Father and Son, we're going to witness something exceedingly special on this day. Not only will this remnant of Israel weep for the firstborn son of Yahowah, as they would weep for the greatest love that anyone ever had, the very one that they pierced. We're going to find that Dowd is going to fulfill the Torah's mandate on this day, which is that it is the day that a man enters the most set apart place in the tabernacle. And so there will be a new tabernacle, likely created out of light. If not, it will be the continuation for a moment of the restored tent of the restoring witness that will be on Mount Moriah, servicing the two witnesses during that time. Or it will be replaced on this day or during the 10 days in between with the new and final home for Yahweh's name called a temple. But I think it's Dowd that rebuilds it according to Yahweh's testimony, so it will probably occur after this. But we are going to have a anointing of the Kippur, of the mercy seat, which would normally require entering the most set apart place of the sanctuary to do this. And it will be Dowd David, who will be adorned as the high priest, who will accomplish this upon his return. And he will sprinkle 7 drops of blood from the bull. That's why there is an Atonement parah. And from the goat, which is why Elia is there, because he is symbolic of that goat. And it will then allow the ultimate reconciliation between God and his family. So this is an extraordinary time, and it serves as the gateway for our return to Eden, to camp out with Yahowah for 1,000 years, beginning on Sukkah, which will be then in that year, the 7th of October, 2033. So you have your bearings, you got a feeling for how all of this is going to play out, because this coming celebration of Yom Kipurym, 2 days from now, on the 1st of October, as the sun sets this Wednesday, is simply a way to remember, to celebrate, to observe, to capitalize upon what's going to happen 8 years from now. So the purpose of the 6th appointment to meet this moed, this restoring witness to the eternal testimony, this invitation to be called out and meet with God, a Miqraey, is defined by its name. God wants to Kippur, reconcile. His relationship with Israel, those who engage and endure with God, and with Yahowah, the beloved of Yah. And there will even be Goyim reconciled at this time because they will have been brought in on the dappled chariot. So there will be many reconciliations occurring simultaneously. So Yom Kipurym is the day of reconciliations. It celebrates Yahweh's return with his beloved son and the resulting restoration of his relationship with his people. This is what is described in Yirmiyah 31. This is the ultimate and most celebrated of all family reunions. This family being the Bereth covenant. Now, while that's great news, the souls of those who ignore, reject, or misconstrue this summons will either cease to exist or they will be exiled. And we know this because that black chariot will be picking up all of the religious dressed in black, all of the political and conspiratorial, the militant, and will be taking them off to Sheol. And most of the earth is just going to be expunged of people, which is why those who have the potential to be allowed into the millennial Shabbat will all be brought into Jerusalem for this purpose. And even then, not all of them are going to survive, because we're going to play out the prophecy in Numbers 5. And in Numbers 5, there is this drink that is of water and ash that has been created by the sacrifice now of the Adam of Parah, Numbers 19. And drinking that is this test of whether or not someone is trustworthy enough to be worth the effort of bringing them into the millennial Shabbat and teaching them what they need to know to become part of God's family. So this is great news for some and not for others. There will be many who cease to exist at this time, and many others whose life will be celebrated for 1,000 years, and while others will watch because they have participated in the shabuw'ah and the taruw'ah in gathering and harvest, they're going to watch as immortals. And along the way, we're going to determine how this date fits into Almighty's prophetic timeline, which I've already shared with you in the introduction. But it's important to see how this is the 6th of 7 Moed Miqraey. That is why that menorah that is spinning over my left shoulder and this one that is on the shelf over my right shoulder have 7 candles. This would be the 6th of 7 candles. When one considers the words of the prophets, the picture that Yahweh is painting is of the return with his beloved son, Dowd David. And it is all to protect his family on Yom Kipurym and to reconcile their relationship. Many of the prophets speak of it, and some, like Zechariah, Malachi, focus on the events of this day, as we also read in portions of Yeshayah and Yirmiyah. Israelites and Yehudim will have thrown off the yoke of religion. They will have come to embrace Yahweh by name. They will come to love his name at long last and rue the day that it was erased. However, for those who have come to destroy Jerusalem and annihilate Jews, their rendezvous with destiny will not have gone as they would have hoped, and they were eradicated on Teruah just 10 days earlier. So this Moed Miqraey, designated by Yahweh as Yom Kipurym, has become known as the Day of Atonement. Over time, rabbis altered God's testimony to suggest atonement, which is a religious term for reconciliation, could only be achieved by afflicting oneself. As a result, Yahweh's intended reunion with his people at this time was corrupted, such that it would imply religious suffering and the deprivation of life by ultra-Orthodox Jews, and they would abstain from all food and drink for 25 hours. But Yahweh says nothing of a fast. Our dictionaries tell us that afflict, which is what the rabbis would tell you that this day represents, a time of affliction, is from the Latin afflictare, meaning to be struck and cast down. So if God's purpose is to reconcile fallen man unto himself, that would be the antithesis of the intended result. And it is in direct conflict with Yahweh lifting us up so that we can stand beside him. It is God's beloved Son who has endured what rabbis want religious Jews to experience, in the sense that Dowd was afflicted to fulfill Pesach 2,000 years before this date. He was bludgeoned by the Romans. It was David who was actually crucified at this time by the Romans in 33 CE of his own choosing to serve as the Passover lamb with his bashar body. And then his soul took our guilt and carted it off to Sheol 2,000 years ago, so that it would never be seen again, making us appear not guilty before God. And then he, as the Bekor, the firstborn son of God, made it possible for us to be part of God's family, Kipurym, Bukorim, if you will, firstborn children of God, as a result of fulfilling Chag Matzah in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. And so his soul was indeed afflicted, serving as the Passover lamb and carrying our guilt into hell so that we might live. And then, as I say, on matzah, unleavened bread, the Messiah's soul was tormented, cast down, abused, as it carried our guilt with him into what is essentially a black hole, never to be seen again. So we now appear perfect in our Father's eyes. And yet, this profound and essential truth was lost when Kippurym's purpose was misconstrued to infer that those being given a second chance at reconciliation should afflict their souls on this day. And I'm certain that clerics and translators alike are wrong with regard to man depriving and humbling himself during the 6th Moed Miqraey. But as we delve deeper into this day, I'll share the evidence with you, such that you can decide how you think we should celebrate God restoring his covenant with his people. Now, to appreciate Yahweh's perspective on this day, realize that his son's Pesach and matzah sacrifices serve as the most beneficial gifts ever offered. With Bikurim, we enjoy the result as the covenant family is born. As a proud father, God watched his Ruach spirit enrich, empower, and enlighten his son. And then his family on Bikurim followed a millennia later with their emancipation on shabuw'ah. Well, 2 millennia later, such that the beneficiaries of the covenant would become more capable with each passing day. So there is this sense of satisfaction in witnessing us perform to our full capability, particularly as we are participants in Teruah, which is probably the greatest day, most spectacular day in all of human history, as it will be played out 8 years from now. That's why I shared some of the events that will take place on this day. And I only shared just the snippet of it because, well, we talked more deeply about it in previous programs. And it is because of that day that when Dowd returns, this will be an exceedingly pleasing day as he returns to his family, who is now going to appreciate and adore him. So we know that a gleaning of a remnant of Israelites and Yehudim will be here in the really extraordinary seats, the immortal seats around Dowd and Yahowah as they return, because they will already be covenant, and there will be many joyful Israelites and Goyim, all now scrubbed clean and anticipating this glorious day. They will look up at Yahowah and Dowd's arrival and exclaim their names. All the while his chosen Mashiach, after preparing the Kippur mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant for our reconciliation, will celebrate having known that Yahowah removed the trash 10 days earlier. All that is left are joyful hearts. All the while Yahowah's Spirit will continue to nurture a earth restored to the conditions of the Garden of Eden. So imagine observing God's countenance for the first time, looking into his eyes. You're only seeing a diminished manifestation of him, but it will be glorious nonetheless. You'll see a smiling face and relish the feelings which will come over us as we walk up to our Heavenly Father after thanking Dowd for the opportunity to be here and giving both a hug. Consider the thrill of having Yahowah write his Torah guidance upon our hearts, inside of us, enabling us and equipping us for this opportunity. Think about the songs we're going to sing, particularly alongside the man who wrote them, Dowd. The sights we will see, the people we will meet, the things we will more fully appreciate. Well, all of that's going to occur on this day. Yom Kipurym, the Day of Reconciliations, celebrates Yahowah's long-awaited reunion with his people. It is a welcome home party. As part of his family, we are prepared for the final step in our journey, where we camp out with our Heavenly Father throughout all time. Miss Leah.
Can I make an announcement?
You can.
Trump just announced himself sovereign over Israel right now.
Trump is.
Yeah, his 20-point peace plan.
Yeah, he.
I wanted to stab the computer.
What my wife just said is that the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles is caused by Donald J. Trump. Trump is the person that Christians know as the Antichrist, although there was no Christ. So I guess it's still fine to say he is Antichrist. Knowing that Christ is a term that is anti-Dowd, because he was robbed to create the caricature. But he is Satan incarnate. He is the one that the prophets spoke of that would be the Torahless one that would betray Israel. And we heard 4 or 5 days ago when Trump so that he said that he would absolutely prohibit Israel from annexing and occupying Judea and Samaria, the land that Yahowah, God, gave to them, that he was referring to Israel as his vassal. And unfortunately, Israel put themselves in this position, but it is a day where Netanyahu now is meeting with Donald Trump, who is imposing his plan, and Donald Trump's plan will cause Israel to give up its very heart, offering its heart up to the Islamic terrorists that want to destroy it. We've told that emphatically by the prophets. We're told even when it would happen. We're told who would make it happen. We've known for a decade that it would be the President of the United States at this time that would betray Israel and force the two-state solution on Israel that would make the Jewish state completely indefensible. And the only way for that to have happened is for Netanyahu to be played. And Netanyahu was played twice over. He was played by the Muslims, and played may not be a comfortable term for you to hear, but what it means is that really, really dumb people with an average IQ in the 60s did something that they knew would cause the response that Netanyahu came forward with. They did not invade and bludgeon Israel with the intent of occupying Israel, not with 4,000 people, mostly on foot, mostly lightly armed, many on motor scooters. That was not an invasion force that was set up to occupy, to colonialize, to capture southern Israel. It was a group of people who were sent there to rape, to pillage, to torment, to abuse, to kidnap, and to savagely murder, such that Israel would become so angry that they could count on Netanyahu responding by entering Gaza to shatter it, to destroy it. And that's what he did. And they knew that by doing so, that the Muslims who died would be perceived as martyrs, win-win for them, and that the world would view what Israel did as so horrendous that the destruction of Gaza would cause the entire world to turn on Israel, and that the last bastion of hope would be the most miserable and hopeless individual in the world, Donald Trump. And they knew that Donald Trump was supplying bombs to Israel because he was told to do so by those who had bribed him, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And you might say, wait a minute, why would Saudi Arabia and Qatar have Netanyahu supply weapons to Israel so that they could use them to bomb Muslims in Gaza? Because Saudi Arabia and Qatar, the thugs that run those countries, they don't care about the lives of these mythical people called Palestinians. They know that they're abhorrent. But what they wanted was Israel to bomb them into oblivion. Because once Israel did that, the whole world would turn on Israel. And then it put Donald Trump in the position where he became owner, controller of Israel. You've no longer an independent state, Israel. You've turned the entire world against you, and now you are beholding to Satan incarnate. That was really, really stupid. And he is going to betray you. He is the Neville Chamberlain who is going to offer your heart up to these Muslims, just as Neville Chamberlain offered the high ground of Czechoslovakia, which was not his to give, to appease the Nazis, to achieve peace in our time. And it led to a war where 55 million people were killed. Donald Trump is that Neville Chamberlain. Israel is his Czechoslovakia. Muslims are his Nazis. MBS is his Hitler. But this time, that war, of which the next invasion will involve 1,000 times the number of jihadists that you witnessed an al-aqsa flood on October 7th of 23. It will be 1,000 times more. And nations will join Israel. The Saudi Arabians, the Qataris, the Emirates, Turkey, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Yemen. Israel's going to be devastated. But this war is going to be an interesting affair because the United States at this point is not going to side with Israel. It's going to side with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And it'll be particularly devastating because China and Russia are now exceedingly opposed to Israel because Netanyahu's ill-fated bombing of Iran. And so there really is no hope for Israel until Yahweh returns. That's why Teruah is so essential, because Yahweh stops the carnage of the time of trouble at that point. But what we're sharing with you now, I have known for over a decade. I have stated it as openly as I possibly could, that an Islamic state would be carved out of the heart of Israel. It would happen at this time, and that the United States would be the final betrayal of Israel. And it is happening exactly as I foretold. And then on November 4th, right after the election, I announced that Donald Trump was the Neville Chamberlain, and shortly thereafter, that he was the demon-possessed monster that would betray Israel and that would destroy the world. And ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what we're witnessing. Now, it all ends on Teruah, and we have a great celebration on Kipurym. But imagine having come out of that time, coming out of a world with all manner of natural disasters, likely comet impacts, volcanoes erupting, great tsunamis, terrible storms, and of course war, world war. Russia against the United States and Europe, China against the US. The world will be engulfed in atomic war, and Israel will be inundated by millions of jihadists and the nations all around. But it all comes to an end. And not only does Yahowah stop it, he goes so much further than that. He restores the earth to the conditions of Eden. Now, if you've been misled and you think there's going to be a Gog from Magog and an Armageddon and a Valley of Dry Bones and all of that sort of thing, you can cast that all aside. The book of Ezekiel is not prophetic. It speaks of Satan's agenda, and the Copper Khan, who is measure man of that book, is none other than Donald Trump. So that you can be assured will not happen. But it's going to be more than just the end of the last war. This transformation to the conditions of Eden are going to be extraordinary. So, we hope you're there. I hope you're prepared for what is going to occur, for what is being offered, that you will do as I've struggled to do over the last 24 years since I met Yahowah. And I met Yahowah, I was already non-religious. I had rejected Christianity. I had rejected politics. I had rejected militarism when I met him. But, you know, these beasts are so pervasive within our society. They're much more difficult to expunge from our system than one might think. And so it has been really over the last 24 years that I have gradually removed one trace after another of religiosity from my thinking, and I would encourage all of those listening to do the same. It's one of the reasons why I was so strong against the notion that God wants us to be meek or timid or modest or any of these kinds of things, that when you read that, it is a mistranslation of the word that God spoke, and that he values those who were bold enough to completely distance themselves from the corruption of humankind. You know, I looked at a map today where it was saying that the fakest Indians have everywhere on earth essentially to go, and because it's just a sea of Islamic nations. And I looked at the list of countries that walked out of the UN when Netanyahu gave his speech. And the realization when you look at those names and you look at those places is that there isn't much of the earth that can be salvaged. I mean, once the people are no longer there and the institutions are no longer there, yeah, the real estate can be made beautiful again, but there really is nothing on earth that is worth salvaging. That's why the covenant is going to be 1 in a million. And it really is only those bold enough to go against societal customs and to embrace what Yahowah is offering and to be comfortable with it, to be bold, to be aggressive, to be uncompromising, to stand up, to shirk all vestiges of religion, that are going to be comfortable with what happens going forward. So from this perspective, imagine how out of place someone would be if in the midst of all of this they said, oh, maybe we should whip ourselves on this day. Let's deny ourselves. Let's afflict ourselves. Let's bow down and be religious. As ridiculous as that would be, why do you think so many people believe that this is how God wants us to act on Yom Kipurym, the day of reconciliations? Now, various dictionaries use humbled, overthrown, troubled, injured, tormented, and tortured to define afflict. Of those, humbled and troubled are about the only possibilities that are not somewhat sadistic. And yet humbled is described as not assertive, which is the antithesis of Yahweh's instructions regarding the terms and conditions of his covenant and how he describes Dowd, his beloved, the exemplar, as a man who is a Gabor. He is calling us to answer a summons. After all, he is causing us to walk away from societal influences. That takes courage, backbone, character. Further, humbled means low, which is the opposite result that God is offering. Humbled means to become insignificant, which is the byproduct of not heeding his call. And humbled speaks of submission, which is surrender. Terms that Yahweh routinely denounces. God's looking for people with strength of character. You know, it even gets back to this idea of nudity, which is why we push back on modesty with it, and the branding, where we are showing the joy that will exist in the earth return to Eden, and that there is this marvelous understanding that comes from what occurred in Eden and what is said thereafter. When you can be as Adam and Chawah, naked, and be comfortable around Yahweh, it's because you got nothing to hide. It's because you know that he can see you, he can be with you, he can experience you, he can work with you and see the beauty in you, the joy in you, the competency in you, the reliability in you. And if you need to be wrapped up and all covered up, it really says that you don't want God to see you, that you're uncomfortable in his presence. I mean, yeah, this is all symbolic, but it's symbolic of something extraordinarily profound. You need to be able to be symbolically naked before God and know that what he sees in you is worthy and good, useful, right, productive, reliable, purged of religiosity. Something to think about. So moving from afflict to affliction doesn't help us any. It is defined as the cause of persistent pain and distress, as great suffering. And that may be the devil's means to a grand reunion when those who have followed him politically and religiously end up in Sheol, hell, but it's certainly not God's idea of a good time. It is the depiction that Allah has of how he's going to treat everyone when they finally meet him. To understand the actual purpose of this day and to better demonstrate the means that God intends for us, let's look to the book of Korah, called out. Missing the point, the religious named the book Leviticus in the 14th century. But the book's name is Korah, and Korah means to be invited, to be called out, and to meet, in this case, with God. So immediately after concluding his thoughts on Teruah, we find, then Yahweh, it's a transliteration of the name of our Elohah, God, as directed by his Torah teaching and his Haya existence, declared the word, Debar, to Moshe, a name which means one who draws out. Draws out of what? Mitzrayim. What does Mitzrayim mean? It's Mitz, Sarah, and the plural, Im. Sarah is trouble, confinement. It's to be restricted by religion and politics, which are control mechanisms. And the my before Sarah speaks of to ponder the implications of these things. And so Moshe is named to draw us out of and away from the negative influence and the controlling nature of religion and politics. And this time of Israel's trouble, Esra, it's based upon Mitzrayim. It means you need to walk away from it even now. Even if you're in Babel or if you're still in Mitzrayim, as the religious are, you need to walk away. Moshe and the Torah draw us out, saying, exclusively, during the 10th month, during the 10th of the 7th month, I'm so frustrated with the rabbis who call this the first month of their new year, when Yahowah refers to it as the 7th. I tripped on my own tongue. It's just utter frustration as to how people claim to speak for God, and they will change the word of God so that the 7th month becomes their first month. It's just absolutely reprehensible. So exclusively during the 10th, this would be the 10th day, it means it's from Ashur, which means to enrich, of the 7th, shabuw'ah, 7, from Shabbat, which means to promise, to offer a solemn oath based upon the formula of 7. So exclusively during the 10th of the 7th month. 7 months would be 7 months from Abib, which is the host of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. So exclusively during the 10th of the 7th month is the day, Yom, of reconciliations, of the Kipurym, of the pardons and forgiveness. It's from kafar, to make reconciliation by purging and covering. This exists as, this was, is, and will always be, called imperfect, true over time, a set apart and special. Kodesh, if something is Kodesh, it means that it is set apart from the profane and common things of the world. And on to Yahowah. What is the single most common thing in our world?
Religion and politics.
1 and 2. I don't know which one is more common, but I think religion has actually been slightly more common in our history than have politics and government. But they are intertwined. That is why Babel speaks of the intermixing and commingling of these things. But to be special unto Yahowah, a day has to be unreligious and non-political. That is something for you to think about. If you are not set apart unto God, then you would be deemed as religious and political, and your fate is determined on whether you are committing what would be considered the crime of commission or subject to omission. Omission means you were misled. Commission, you're misleading. The difference is the extermination of your soul, which is not good, or the incarceration of your soul, which is really bad. So there exists a set apart and special, a Kodesh, invitation to be called out and meet. So we know that it is a day, one day, the 10th day of the 7th month for Kippurim, reconciliations, and it will always be Haya in the imperfect. It will always exist as something that is Kodesh, set apart and special. And it is a Miqraey, an invitation to be called out and meet. There are 7 Miqraey. Miqraey is the plural of Miqraey. Miqraey is from the Hebrew verb kara. We had somebody that was doing words of the day, and I beside me why they would begin with such a obscure term, but they picked a term that was only used once, and even then misrepresented it. When there are so many marvelous Hebrew words that are used many, many times and that have exceedingly important, well-defined purposes. And Miqraey is one of them. Miqraey is based on the verbal root kara. It is preceded by the me, which is an interrogatory. So it means to ponder all things related to kara. Kara is an invitation and summons. It is a time to be called out, to meet, to greet, and to be welcomed. It is an occasion to read and recite. And so it's to think about all of the implications of these things. And there are 7 of them. They are designated by the 7 lights on that menorah that is spinning over my shoulder. There are very few things as important as a day which is Kodesh to Yahowah, of which reconciliation, Yom Kipurym, is, and as a day that is a Miqraey, Miqraey in the singular, which is a welcoming summons to read and recite, an invitation to be called out and meet. This is important, and it ends la-atem, which you could simply render to you, for you, concerning you, or because the preposition speaks of approaching and drawing near, for you to approach and draw near. And it was atem versus atah, which means that it speaks of you, plural. You all, if you were in the South, or if you were covenant, you, ya, all, from a covenant perspective. So excuse me for stating the obvious, but this is the word of Yahweh. He's the one speaking here. He's using Moshe as his mouth. And he just so happens to be God. Fairly important position. Well, at least if you want to enjoy this life, be productive in this life, and live beyond it. He is the creator of the universe. He is the author of life. He is the one who gave us the Torah and the prophets. He is the one who spoke these words. Therefore, anyone who would discount, misconstrue, or replace this testimony with religious jargon is not just circumventing God's intent, they are misleading those who believe them. And that would include every author of the Christian New Testament, as well as the authors, the rabbis of the Babylonian Talmud. We do not very often see a declaration announced with ak. It is really quite rare in the Torah. It means exclusively, only, without exception. No excuses, no deviations. This is really important. Why? It's God's homecoming. God himself is coming home with Dowd. If you're not there and you're not prepared for their return, then you're going to be incinerated. Then you're going to, or be incarcerated. This is not a day to take lightly. Therefore, there is something extraordinarily unique about Kippurim, something which will occur this one and only time on this one and only day. There is no other day that designates Yahweh's return with his beloved son, Dowd, other than Kippurim. It's the day. So the numbers designating the timing are also instructive in themselves. This is the 7th month, the time of promise. We're just about to begin the 7th millennia. It is the 10th day, symbolizing our enrichment. 7 is conveyed by the zayin, which depicts a plow removing weeds while turning over the ground and preparing it to receive nutrients and support new life when moving in the direction that God intends. 10 is portrayed by Yahweh's Yod hand reaching out to us at this time. So as is the case with the other Moed, the eternal witnesses to the restoring testimony. Yom Kipurym, the day of reconciliations, this is presented as a Miqraey Kodesh, a set apart and special invitation to be called out and meet with God and with his beloved Son. This designation helps shape our appreciation for how it should be observed. It is an opportunity to read and recite the Torah, to proclaim Yahweh's name, to invite friends and family to come home with us, to summon God's people so that they come back home, and to welcome them into the covenant, or at the very least to be part of that mortal remnant. Kippur is used 8 times, always in the plural form as Kippurim. It is based upon the verbal root kafar, which I have to laugh at because while the word means to make reconciliation by purging and covering, and this indicates that by purging us of the residue of religious corruption, we are cleansed of its stain and stigma. I have to laugh for 2 reasons. One is that when you read the story of the sacrifice of the animal parah, Numbers 19, and you read the story of the beneficiary, which is the religious nature of Israel, in Numbers 5. And you take those prophetic stories into account and you hear what Yahshua and the Torah have to say about the bull and the role the bull plays on Teruah to purge the religiosity out of this final remnant. That how rabbis and everyone else, Christians and the like, just have no concept of what they call the red heifer is all about, and what is going to occur on this day to purge people of their religiosity so that they can be seen in Yahweh's presence. But the other reason I laugh is that long ago I came to realize that the Quran, which I have written 5 books to expose and condemn, this would be volume 5, no, this is volume 3 of those 5 volumes, 825 pages apiece. What I came to realize many years ago is that the Quran is actually written in Hebrew, and that Arabic is nothing but a bastardized version of Hebrew. And the letters are all the same. The pronunciation of those letters is the same, and the vocabulary is very, very similar. For example, Quran is this root that I've been talking about of Miqraey, kara. Kara means to read and recite, which is how it was picked up for the Quran. And of course, the Quran is largely comprised of Talmud stories that the rabbis sold to Muhammad. And so it has lots of Hebrew stories in it. And Hebrew, therefore, pronunciation of terms. But when you find Allah, who is modeled after Satan, and he is constantly condemning the kafar to die. And kafar is typically rendered as infidels, but it doesn't mean infidels. In fact, when you read the Quran from an interlinear and you examine the vocabulary underlying it, you'll find that even in Arabic, the kafar means to purge, to be covered, and it speaks of the reconciled. And so when Satan is all up in arms and he wants his Muslims to go off and hunt down and kill the kafar, what he's really saying is that those who have benefited from this purification of our souls that Yahweh is offering are the enemies of Satan. So it's an interesting insight into the fact that Satan is obviously much smarter than the Muslims who promote the religion, because they have no idea that Satan is targeting those who are closest to God in that vocabulary. So anyway, that's the nature of it. It means to be covered in Yahweh's light, to become perfect in Yahweh's eyes by being purged of our guilt because of what Dowd has previously done on Matzah. So as reported, Kippurim can convey atonement, especially if it is cleansed of its religious trappings, because atone means to repair the damage done by an offense by way of expiation. And to expiate is to extinguish any guilt occurred so as to make amends. Atonement is therefore a very specific form of forgiveness, which includes a pardon and leads to reconciliation, so a harmonious relationship. As such, the name Yahweh assigned to this day is consistent with the message of Passover and unyeasted bread. These are related and sequential events, one flowing from the other. Now, based upon these insights, Kippurim is most accurately translated as reconciliations, as a purging of the past to provide a pardon. It is a time for forgiveness and of a time where the relationship can be reconciled. Now, to reconcile, of course, is to resolve a dispute and to restore rapport. In the plural form, this is the day of reconciliations, and God has many sons and daughters, so he is continuing to build his covenant family. At Kippurim, we find affirmation that the Torah is reconciling the relationship between all 12 tribes, those of the northern kingdom and of Yehudah, and also between Yisrael, Yehudah, and God himself, as well as there will be a very large contingent of Goyim on this day too, merged into Yisrael in some ways and separate in others, but nonetheless purged to participate in our return to the garden. The Day of Reconciliations is between Yahweh and his people, and Yisrael and Yehudah, as well as some of the workers of the millennial Shabbat, Goyim, although they have a different role. It has nothing to do with Goyim in the sense of their covenant participation, at least in this point. The Goyim on this day will be brought in to be the workers during the millennial Shabbat. That'd be the greatest job ever and the best working conditions ever, and vastly superior to the alternative. So don't feel sorry for them. They're going to be celebrating the fact that they were chosen for this opportunity. But that's their role here. And I think they'll be celebrating too. So there are many, many different beneficiaries and prophetic implications to this day. And we will consider ourselves fortunate to be allowed to witness the reunion that will have taken place because we were adopted into this same family. There is another, albeit related aspect of Kippurim. Kippureth, like Kippurim, is based on kafar, and it is used to describe the cover of the Ark of the Covenant, which comprises the mercy seat, which is also Dowd's throne. It would serve as the place of reconciliation when the high priest sprinkled the Kipporeth of the Aaron Eduth of the Ark of the Enduring Witness 7 times with the blood of the sacrifice during the Day of Reconciliations. For context, here is one of the 27 times that the Kipporeth is mentioned. It reads, when Moshe went into the tent of the eternal witness to the restoring appointments, the Moed, to speak with Yahweh, he heard a voice speaking to him from above the Kipporeth, the mercy seat, the place of reconciliation, the cover or lid of the Ark of the Covenant, representing purging the past to cleanse the soul, from kafar to purge, cleanse, remove, and cover in the process of reconciling a relationship, which was beneficially associated with the Ark of the Enduring and Restoring Testimony, Ha-Eduth, and for the purpose of making the connections to understand. The two Karbuim, these are the winged malach, if you will, but a very high status of a malach, cherubim, speaking with him. So you've got these cherubim who are representative of protection. They were on the walls of Eden. They are on the walls of the most set apart part of the tent of the witness and also of the temple. And they are on the sides of the Ark of the Covenant. If, this would be the Ark of the Covenant, the front of it is open, but you have one of the cherubim wings that would be on this right side, kind of like an armrest, if you will, and then the other wing going halfway across the back. And then would meet with the second one, doing the same thing across the back, sort of a backrest, if you will, to turn it into a comfortable seat, and then the armrest on this other side. That is how the cherubim are positioned on the Kippur, the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. And they're mirrored on the back wall of the tabernacle as well, larger versions of them. And in this particular case, there were real ones that were speaking with Moshe. So what we're reading here is that the merciful cover, the Kippurim and Kippur, are symbolic of, if you will, maybe even a garment of light provided by the Ruach of Yahowah, adorning us when we become covenant. Although that may or may not occur in that way, because what I had previously perceived is that God would have to have a way to purge us of our guilt, but he really doesn't, because he came up with a far better plan. Its removal. Our guilt was taken into Sheol on Matzah by Dowd and forever put out of sight, such that it never could be seen again. That's one of the reasons that we can appear before God naked, symbolically, if you will, and be very comfortable in his presence. It's why the children of Israel were so uncomfortable, even after 3 days of getting their clothes all cleaned and prepared and getting themselves all scrubbed up to meet with Yahowah at the base of Mount Horeb during the beginning of the Exodus. And yet they told God to go away. They didn't want to hear from him or see him again, lest they were going to die, because they didn't feel comfortable in his presence, even all scrubbed up and clothed to the T. They didn't like God looking and seeing them as they were. So this really is a mindset and an attitude where you get so comfortable with God, you don't rely on any kind of separation or covering. So I would just say that God has provided a way to make us perfect in his eyes, and to make sure that we wouldn't miss this metaphor in Bereshith 6:14, he called the ark being covered in called the ark that was being covered to the other ark a bereth, a family home. So this is relevant because we will soon discover that Yom Kipurym provides the opportunity to bring Yahweh's family back home together. And at the conclusion of Korah, Leviticus 23:27, we also find confirmation that the Day of Reconciliations isn't for God. Nope. It is la atem, for all of you to approach and draw near. God is calling a meeting. He has invited the participants, and he has defined the purpose. So as not to interpret Yahweh's presentation, his invitation to Yom Kipurym begins this way. Let's not interrupt what God has to say, but continue to listen. Then Yahowah declared the word to Moshe, one who draws out, saying, exclusively, during the 10th of the 7th month is the Day of Reconciliations. This exists as a set apart and special invitation to be called out and meet, for you all to approach. Then your soul, your consciousness, that part of you which is capable of being observant and responsive, should respond. Anah should answer by replying to the summons, making a declaration after engaging in thought, vocally communicating, and appear before Karab, this feminine manifestation of the fiery light, Isha, to approach Yahowah. Kara called out Leviticus 23:27. We're going to conclude our program on this passage, but I wanted to say several things about it. One is one of the most important verbs in Hebrew is anah. It actually fits that discussion we had previously about not being meek or modest, but instead being bold, willing to engage and stand up when it's necessary. When Yahweh is explaining to Israel that he chose Moshe to speak through, and he did not choose Miriam or Aaron to speak through, and that their claim that they also spoke for God was dead wrong. That if you speak for God, and that's true, that God has announced that you indeed speak for him, and it's very clear that he has made that announcement. But beyond that, he went on to talk about why he chose Moshe. And he did not say because he was the most humble. Anah with a wa, as opposed to anah with a hey, is based upon this verb. And therefore, anah cannot say because he was the most humble. No, it's based on a verb that says he is the most responsive. He is the one who was willing to reply. He was the one who was willing to answer the call. And that is what God is asking of us. Is your soul ready to respond? Will you answer the call? God is offering you an invitation. Will you reply? And in this case, he's asking you to appear before the Isha. Isha is a word that can mean one of two things. It only has two meanings. Woman, female, if you will, or it means fire. Ish in Hebrew is fire. Fire comes in a masculine and feminine form. Whether or not there is a distinction between the two, we aren't told. But fire is like many things in Hebrew that is presented in a masculine and feminine form. Isha would be the feminine word for fire. And sometimes things are used because God wants to associate them with something else. And so by using the feminine form of fire, he's able to make a connection with two different things, one of which in this case was specified and another which was not. And let me explain. This says, then your Nefesh, your soul. Do you know that Nefesh is a feminine noun? So my Nefesh as a guy is a feminine noun in Hebrew. So is my wife's as a woman. The term doesn't make me a girl any more than it makes her superwoman. It's just that it's a feminine term. And so the fire here is the fire of our soul. It is the fire that transforms our soul. And so if you wanted to have a fire that was specifically designed for our soul, well, it would be Isha rather than Ish. And what would that mean? Well, fire transforms dying organic material, my body. I'm ready to say goodbye to it. The moment that Yahweh says we can toss it and be spiritual beings, I'm all in. So what fire does is it transforms these decaying physical bodies, if you will, into light and radiant energy. And light and energy are vastly more powerful and capable. As light, we can traverse the universe. We can enter the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions. We're enormously more powerful and capable as light, and we're immortal, and we're perfect as light. So this Isha is likely referencing the feminine noun that was used right at the beginning of the sentence. I mean, it establishes the feminine thing that is going to benefit from that Isha light, our Nefesh soul. Let your Nefesh soul should respond. It should appear before this transformative fiery light to approach Yahowah. So we learned something, didn't we? First time, I've been through this material. Oh boy, I bet I've been through it 20 times, 30 times. And I've always wondered, why did God choose to use the feminine versus the masculine word for fire here? And I understand fiery light and the transformative effect on Kippurim and all these other Moed Miqraey, where Yahowah asks us to do exactly the same thing, to come into the present, to come close, to draw near, which is what karab means, coming close into the proximity of. But I always assumed that it had to do with the fact that the Ruach of Yahowah is also a feminine noun, and maybe it was the Ruach who was participating in this event in this way, and maybe God is deploying the Ruach, but guess what's not mentioned? Ruach. But what is mentioned? Our Nefesh. And so Nefesh is the feminine thing that would cause God to use the feminine version of fiery light. So let me read the statement again for your edification. So this exists as a set apart and special invitation to be called out and meet, for you all to approach. Then your soul, your Nefesh, should respond, should answer by replying to the summons, to make a declaration, engaging in thought, verbally communicating, coming up with the answer, and appear before this feminine manifestation of fiery light to approach Yahowah. Kara called out Leviticus 23:17. Be a lovely place for us to pick up again. We have a number of programs between now and the time that we'll be celebrating Yom Kipurym, and then a number of days between then and the time that we'll celebrate Sukkah. And of course, we will dedicate programs to each of these because, well, I don't think anyone heretofore has understood them. And I think you just heard a teaching regarding Isha and our Nefesh that has been heretofore never perceived previously. That is very meaningful as to the vocabulary that Yahowah chose to communicate this message to us, which is why it is such a tremendous joy to have this opportunity to listen and learn from him, to come to understand, to grow, and then to share. I thank you for being part of this program. May Yahowah bless you the rest of the day.